Snow fell slowly over the devastated battlefield. The smell of gunpowder and blood permeated the air, mixing with the heavy silence that preceded dawn. In the midst of destruction, Constantine, he was staggering, holding a letter stained with mud and blood between his trembling fingers. His eyes were heavy, not only from extreme tiredness, but from the bitter certainty that those could be his last words. He took a deep breath, trying to ignore the sharp pain in his chest. Each step was an almost unbearable effort, but he needed to find a safe place, a last refuge to finish what he had started. His body was weak, but his mind pulsed with memories of Yelena's laugh, the way her hair danced in the wind, the promise he had made before leaving. The phrase echoed in his mind as if someone was whispering in his ear. He had never considered himself a hero. I never wanted to be a soldier, but here he was, lost on a battlefield that didn't belong to him, fighting an enemy he barely understood. The real enemy, he realized too late, was time stolen from himself and Yelena. He leaned against a piece of destroyed wall, his heart hammering in his chest like a war drum. That was the last thing he could still give Yelena: his heart, his soul, his goodbye. He remembered the first day he saw her. It was spring, and the scent of flowers filled the air. Yelena was sitting by the river, her bare feet touching the cold water, humming a tune he didn't recognize. He stood there, just watching, enchanted by the way the sunlight played with his hair. He approached slowly, hesitantly, and tried to start a conversation. He was singing like an angel. She laughed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "And you sound like someone who wants a kiss." Her audacity made him smile. She was unlike any other woman he had ever met, so free, so fearless. That afternoon, they walked together through the field, sharing stories, dreams, desires. She wanted to travel the world. He just wanted to find a place where he could be happy. Happiness is not in one place, Constantine. It's in a person. She touched the tip of his nose with her finger, laughing at the silly expression he made. He knew at that moment that Yelena would be the love of his life. But war doesn't care about love stories. She doesn't care about promises made under the stars. When rumors of war became reality, Constantine knew he could not escape the call. His country needed him, or at least that's what they said. He didn't want to leave, but there was no choice. The night before he left, he and Yelena stayed up until dawn, cuddling on the roof of the small house where she lived. He wanted to memorize every detail of her, the smell of her hair, the texture of her skin, the sound of her breathing. She handed him a small silver medallion with a delicate thread, "So that you never forget who you are, so that you always come back to me." He held the locket tightly, as if it could hold him to life, bring him back home. "I'll be back, Yelena. I always come back to you." But destiny does not always allow promises to be fulfilled. In the present, Constantine opened his eyes, moving away from the memories. The pain was unbearable now. His fingers were numb, and he knew time was running out. He picked up a broken pencil and, with effort, began to write. "Yelena, my beloved, if this is my last letter, I want you to know that every beat of my heart belongs to you. Forgive me for not coming back. But when you feel the wind touch your face, it will be me, whispering your name." The words were blurred by the blood that dripped from his fingers. He tried to continue, but his body no longer obeyed. Tears flowed from her eyes when one last thought took over his mind. "If I could have just one more moment with you." The snow continued to fall, covering the land in white, as if it wanted to erase the horrors of war. Constantine smiled, slightly, holding the letter to his chest. And then, the world went dark. Spring always brought with it new hope. The fields bloomed, the scent of flowers filled the air, and the birds sang songs that seemed to embrace the world. It was a time of life, a time of promises. And it was in a spring like this that Constantine and Yelena met for the first time. The river flowed lazily under the golden afternoon sun. The wind played with the leaves of the trees, making them dance gently. Constantine was walking across the field, his boots crunching the grass beneath his feet, when he saw her. She was sitting on a rock near the riverbank, her bare feet touching the crystal-clear water. Her pale dress swayed in the breeze, and her golden hair seemed like a heavenly frame around her face. But what caught his attention the most was the melody she hummed. It was something sad, but at the same time beautiful. A melody that seemed to carry the weight of a heart that I had once loved deeply. Constantine stood still for a moment, just watching her. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to approach. Then, without thinking, The words escaped his lips. "You sing like an angel." Yelena looked up and smiled. She didn't seem surprised or embarrassed, just curious. "And you sound like someone who wants a kiss." The unexpected answer made him laugh. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. There was a liveliness in his eyes, a freedom in the way he spoke. "What if I really want to?" he challenged. Crossing his arms, she tilted her head to the side, as if analyzing him. Then, with a mischievous smile, he pointed to the river. "So, you'll have to reach me first." And before he could react, she got up and ran, her bare feet skimming the earth as if they belonged to her. They spent the afternoon together. They ran around the field, laughed, told stories. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, they were already sitting under the shade of a large oak tree, watching the sunset turn the sky orange and pink. "Where do you want to go, Yelena?" Konstantin asked, observing the way she looked at the horizon, as if dreaming of something far away. She was silent for a moment, and then whispered, "I want to see the world. I want to see places I've only heard about. I want to walk down streets I've never seen. I want to see the sea." She turned to him and smiled. "And you, Konstantin, what do you want?" He took a deep breath, thinking he had never allowed himself to dream too big. His life had always been simple, without great expectations. But now, looking at Yelena, everything seemed different. "I want to find a place where I can be happy." She laughed softly and laid her head on his shoulder. "Happiness is not in one place, Konstantin. It's in a person." At that moment he knew Yelena would be the love of his life. The following weeks were magical. They met every day, living as if the entire world belonged to them. Yelena took him to the flower fields, where they danced without music, just listening to the sound of the wind. Konstantin took her to the city's small library, where he read to her the most beautiful poems he could find. And then, on a starry night, they made their promise. "Swear that you will always come back to me," Yelena whispered, her fingers intertwined with his. "I swear." She looked at him with those deep eyes, as if she wanted to believe that that promise would never be broken. "So, promise me one more thing. Anything." She took a small silver locket out of her pocket and placed it in his hands. "Take this with you, always, so that you never forget who you are, so that you always come back to me." "I always come back to you, Yelena. Always." But the winds of war were blowing stronger and stronger. Rumors spread throughout the city. Men were recruited, sent to distant places from which few returned. And then the call came to Konstantin. He knew he couldn't run away. His name was on the list, and if he tried to escape, he would put everyone around him in danger. When he told Yelena, she didn't cry. She just stood there, looking at him with heavy silence. "You promised you would always come back, and I will return." But destiny does not always allow promises to be fulfilled. The night before he left, they spent the last few hours together, hugging each other, feeling each other's breath, trying to memorize every detail. Yelena didn't sleep. He just stood there, holding his hand, as if he could hold him there forever. When the sun rose, it was time to go. Konstantin kissed her for the last time before getting on the train. "I always come back to you, Yelena, always." And then, he left. Yelena stood on the platform, holding the medallion identical to the one she had given him, murmuring a silent prayer into the wind. But fate doesn't always hear prayers. The morning was grey. The sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds, as if the sky itself mourned what was about to happen. The entire city seemed enveloped in a strange silence, broken only by the insistent whistle of the trains and the trembling voices of families saying goodbye to their loved ones. Konstantin and Yelena were there, in the crowd, but they seemed alone in the world. Yelena held Konstantin's hand tightly, their fingers intertwined as if they were one. She didn't cry, not yet, but her face was pale, and her eyes carried a gleam of fear that she couldn't hide. Konstantin wanted to say something that would comfort her. He wanted to find words that could ease the pain that enveloped them, but the lump in his throat prevented him from speaking. Everything seemed suffocating, the smell of burning coal, the hot steam coming out of the locomotives, the sobs of women who saw their husbands leaving with no guarantee of return. He wanted to pretend that he would come back soon, wanted to promise that everything would be okay, but the truth hung over them like a cruel shadow. He knew what happened to the soldiers who were sent to that war. He knew many would not return. Yelena squeezed his hand tighter, bringing him back to reality. "I wrote to you." Her voice was low, almost a whisper. She held out a sealed envelope, her fingertips trembling slightly. "Read when you feel scared." He took the letter, running his fingers over the yellowed paper. This was a piece of her, something he could carry with him when he was far away, when everything around him was just pain and destruction. "I always come back to you, Yelena, always. But destiny doesn't always keep promises." The train let out a loud, long whistle. It was a piercing sound, announcing that there was no more time. The soldiers began to board. The goodbyes became more intense. Mothers hugged their children desperately. Wives sobbed in their husbands' arms. Children called for their departing parents. Yelena looked into Konstantin's eyes, and for a moment, everything around her disappeared. "I can't lose you." Her voice broke at the end of the sentence. The pain she tried to hide finally boiled over. Konstantin felt his chest tighten. How could he leave her there, alone, not knowing if she would come back? How could he abandon her to face the world without him? But there was no choice. He raised his hand and gently touched her face, tracing the outline of her smooth skin. "Close your eyes." She frowned. "Why?" "Just close it." Hesitantly, Yelena obeyed. Konstantin leaned over and kissed her forehead tenderly, leaving his lips there longer than he should have. He wanted to cherish that moment forever. When she opened her eyes again, she saw him smiling. But it was a sad smile, a smile that said more than any words could. "Now, promise me one thing." She nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. "If I don't come back." Yelena immediately shook her head, refusing to listen. "No, you will come back. You promised." He held her hands and brought them close to his chest. "If I don't come back, live for me. Keep dreaming, keep singing. Don't let this war take you to..." The tears finally came. "I just want you." He wanted to respond that she already had everything from him. Your heart, your soul, your eternal love. But the words stuck in his throat. The second whistle sounded. Now, only seconds remained. Konstantin slowly released his hands, his fingers reluctant to part. Yelena wanted to run. She wanted to hold him and stop him from getting on that train, but she knew it wouldn't change anything. He took a step back, then another. And then, without thinking, Yelena took the necklace off her own neck and placed it in his hand. "So that you never forget who you are. So that you always come back to me." Konstantin closed his hand around the locket, feeling the cold metal against his warm skin. The last whistle sounded, the last chance for a goodbye. He held the medallion tightly and got on the train. Yelena stood there, her body shaking. As she watched the door close, the train started to move, slowly, then faster. She ran alongside the carriage, her eyes fixed on him. Konstantin placed his hand against the glass, his eyes full of emotion. Yelena tried to keep up with him, but her legs gave out. She stopped, holding her hands to her chest, panting. And then, he disappeared into the horizon. The silence that followed was deafening. Yelena stood there, standing on the empty platform, as the world around her continued to spin. People cried, hugged each other, but she didn't move. She felt the cold wind touch her face, and, for a moment, she closed her eyes. "Read it when you feel scared." Her words echoed in his mind. With shaking hands, she opened her own envelope, the one she had written to Konstantin but never had the courage to hand over. Inside, there was just one sentence. "You promised you'd always come back. But destiny doesn't always keep promises." What if it were you? Imagine that someone you love is going off to war, promising that they will return. But can this promise be fulfilled? Konstantin boarded that train with only one thought, to get back to Yelena. But now, in the bitter cold of the battlefield, he faces a brutal reality. War has no mercy. Fear, hunger, and death are everywhere. Comment here. Hang in there, Konstantin. If you believe that Yelena's love can be your strength to survive, leave a like if this story has touched your heart, and share it with someone who loves exciting stories. Like this, we will see how Konstantin faces the hell of war, holding only a letter and a promise. Will he survive? The first thing Konstantin noticed when he arrived on the battlefield was the smell. It was a nauseating odor of blood, gunpowder, and wet earth, mixed with the stench of death that hung in the air like an invisible specter. The snow covering the ground was no longer white, but stained with mud and blood. The war was not like the patriotic speeches he had heard before leaving. It was not made of glory, honor, or bravery. It was made of fear, pain, and senseless death. Konstantin and the other recruits were thrown into a cold, muddy trench. with no time to get used to their surroundings. He still held his backpack tight to his chest, as if that could give him some kind of comfort. "Keep your heads down and follow orders. Any mistake could mean death," ordered the commander with a tired look, as if he had already seen hundreds of boys like him come and leave, never to return. Constantine swallowed hard and tightened his fingers around Yelena's locket, hidden beneath her uniform. "I always come back to you." He repeated this like a silent prayer, trying to calm the rising fear within him. The first attack came at dawn. The silence was broken by a deafening bang, and then everything turned to chaos. Explosions shook the earth beneath their feet, and screams of pain and despair echoed around them. Constantine ran with the other soldiers, holding his rifle with shaking hands. He didn't want to kill anyone, but there, in that hell, the choice was clear: kill or be killed. He saw companions fall beside him, bodies shattered, eyes glassy with terror and pain. He wanted to scream, but his voice was caught in his throat. The war was real, and she didn't forgive anyone. In the rare moments of silence, when the shooting stopped for a few hours and the blizzard took over the landscape, Constantine sought refuge in his only source of comfort: Yelena's letters. He would move away from the group, light a flickering candle, and unfold the papers carefully, as if they were sacred relics. "Constantine, my love, I know the world around you can be cruel, but I want you to remember the field where we ran together, the light breeze from the river and the sound of my laughter. When everything seems dark, close your eyes and find me there. I'll wait for you, always." He closed his eyes and held the letter to his chest. "If you ever feel afraid, remember that my heart beats next to yours." Her words were the only thing that still kept him human in that place. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Winter arrived mercilessly, turning the battlefield into a freezing hell. Hunger was a constant shadow. Water was little. Food was scarce. Some soldiers died, not from enemy bullets, but from the cold that slowly consumed their strength. Constantine felt his body weaken. Every movement was an effort, and his fingers, always cold, could barely hold the pen to write his answers to Yelena. He tried to keep his letters optimistic, to hide the true face of the war from her. "Dear Yelena, today it snowed. The field is white and beautiful, and for a moment, I remembered you and how your laugh lights up any place. I'll be back soon, and we'll laugh about it all together." But as he finished writing, he felt a crushing weight on his chest. What if he didn't come back? The idea was suffocating. He looked around and saw the empty faces of his companions, men who had already given up hope, who were fighting only because there was no other option. He didn't want to become one of them. "I promised I'd come back." He repeated this phrase every night, as if he could defy fate. It was on a freezing night, under a dark, starless sky, that war showed its cruelest face. The enemy advanced with fury. The trenches were attacked by surprise, and before they could react, explosions swept away the soldiers like leaves in the wind. Constantine was thrown against the trench wall, his head hitting the frozen wood. The world spun around him, and for a moment, everything was silent. He tried to get up, but something was wrong. His body ached, and there was a strange heat spreading down his side. He looked down and saw blood slowly dripping from his abdomen. He was injured. He heard screams in the distance, gunshots, explosions. Everything seemed distant now. He tried to drag himself away from the fighting, his breathing short and ragged, his blood stained the snow beneath him, creating a grotesque red trail. "Not here. I can't die here." But his strength was fading. With difficulty, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. Yelena's last letter. His unfocused eyes tried to read the words, but the pain was too great. He clutched the paper to his chest, as if it could absorb her presence, as if it could bring her closer. And then, one last memory flashed through his mind. Yelena, running through the flower field, laughing. In the wind, the war stole everything. But this memory, no one could take away from him. His eyes closed, and the world went dark. The pain was unbearable. Constantine didn't know how long he had been there, lying in the dirty snow, his blood mixing with the sodden earth. The cold cut into his skin like invisible blades, and his breath was just a fragile whisper. The battlefield was distant now, the sounds of war muffled by his own exhausted body. Everything around him seemed to dissolve into shadows, but then something brought him back. A letter from Yelena. With a superhuman effort, He opened his eyes and looked at the piece of paper stained with blood and snow. He couldn't die there. He couldn't leave her waiting for a man who would never return. "You promised you'd always come back." Her words echoed in his mind, as if Yelena's own voice was whispering in his ear. With all the strength he had left, he dragged himself through the snow, feeling pain tear through his body with every movement he needed to survive. Time has lost its meaning. Hours or days may have passed as Constantine fought unconsciousness, clinging to life by tooth and nail. Voices, he couldn't tell if it was real or just a dream. But suddenly he felt strong hands pulling him up. He tried to open his eyes, but his vision was blurred. "This one is still alive." Soldiers lifted him, carrying him down a muddy trail. Everything was spinning around him, and the pain made every beat of his heart feel like thunder inside his head. He felt the heat of a fire as he was laid down on a hard floor. Voices whispered around him, orders were given, and then a needle pierced his arm. The pain pulled him back to reality. He was in a makeshift medical station, surrounded by other injured soldiers, wails of agony filling the space like a choir of lost souls. But he was still alive, and that meant he still had a chance to get back to Yelena. The days turned into weeks. Constantine fought against the fever, against the pain, against the despair that grew inside him like a shadow. War had no mercy on the weak. Many of the men around him did not survive. He saw them being carried out of the camp, bodies covered in dirty sheets. Death was always there, prowling like a vulture, but Constantine refused to give in. Whenever the pain was too great, whenever his will to fight began to fade, he would take Yelena's letters and read each word as if it were medicine for his soul. "If you ever feel afraid, remember that my heart beats next to yours." And then, he wrote. Even if his hand shook, even if the ink stained the paper, he wrote to her, pouring out everything his heart held. "My beloved Yelena, today the snow fell slowly, and for a moment, I could pretend I was home. I could pretend you were by my side, holding my hand like that last night under the stars. I close my eyes and I can almost feel your touch. That's what keeps me alive." He wrote about the cold, about the sleepless nights, about the friends he had lost, but never about fear. Never about the possibility of not coming back, because he still believed in the promise he made to her. "I always come back to you." Doctors said he would need months to fully recover, but he didn't have months. The war waited for no one. So, he forced his body to move ahead of time. He ignored the pain, ignored the weakness, and each day that passed, he forced himself to walk a little further. At first, just a few steps, then little more. Every move was a sacrifice. But Constantine knew he couldn't give up, because Yelena was waiting for him, because he promised to return, and promises he never broke. One night, as he watched the starry sky over the camp, a sergeant approached him with a serious look in his eyes. "Constantine, you are back on duty. Your squad needs you." He felt his heart tighten. He wasn't ready, but in war, no one ever is. He picked up his backpack and placed Yelena's letters inside. He kept the medallion against his chest and closed his eyes for a moment, whispering one last prayer. "Wait for me, Yelena. I'm coming back." But the war still had other plans. The war gave no respite. The months dragged on like an endless nightmare, and Constantine, although he was still breathing, felt that a part of himself had already died on that battlefield. He saw friends fall beside him, men who until recently shared pieces of bread and talked about their families, now lay on the ground, motionless, forgotten by history. But Constantine was still there. He still held his medallion, Yelena, against the chest. He still read his letters every night, as if they were a prayer, a sacred ritual that connected him to the only thing that still gave him hope. "You promised you'd always come back." Those words echoed inside him, a promise that became harder to keep every day. And then came the order that would change everything. That morning, the camp was quieter than usual. The cold was biting, and the soldiers gathered around small fires, trying to absorb any trace of heat. It was then that the commander entered the tent, his gaze heavy. "Men, we have new orders." Everyone straightened up, paying attention. The enemy fortified their positions in the nearby village. "If we don't take that territory by dawn, we will be surrounded." Constantine felt his stomach drop. He knew what that meant. "We need a group of volunteers to lead the initial attack. It will be an infiltration mission, quick, decisive." The soldiers exchanged tense glances. Everyone knew this was a suicide. the chances of returning were almost zero. And then, the commander's voice cut through the silence. "Constantine, you will lead this mission." Time seemed to stop. Fear shot up his spine like poison, but he couldn't refuse. In war, orders were not requests. He looked up at the grey sky above, and for a moment imagined he was at home, lying on the grass, with Yelena by your side, telling him stories about the places he wanted to see. "I always come back to you." He swallowed and nodded. "Yes, sir." That night, while the rest of the battalion slept, Constantine sat alone under a dead tree, holding a sheet of paper and a small pencil stub. He needed to write. He needed to leave his words to Yelena, in case he didn't return. "My beloved Yelena, if this is my last letter, I want you to know that every beat of my heart belonged to you. I fought for our promise. I fought to come back to you. But if fate decides that this is the end of me, I want you to continue. I want you to live, to love, to be happy, even without me. If you ever miss me, look at the sky. I will be there, in every star, in every breeze that touches your face. I will always be part of you." He paused, feeling his eyes burn. "Forgive me for not keeping my promise. I love you." He folded the letter and kept it inside his uniform. If he didn't come back, she hoped someone would find it and give it to her. Dawn arrived. With a cold, biting wind, Constantine and his squad moved silently through the woods, advancing towards the enemy-occupied village. His heart was beating fast. Every step felt like a countdown. He clutched the locket in his hand for a moment before letting out a sigh. "Wait for me, Yelena. I'm coming back." The first shots broke the silence of the night, and then everything turned to chaos. Explosions, screams, fire. Constantine ran through the ruins of the village, dodging bullets, his companions falling around him like leaves in the wind. He advanced, fighting, each movement guided by a single force. The promise he made to Yelena. But fate does not take pity on lovers. A nearby explosion threw his body backwards. The impact was overwhelming, and he felt a sharp pain shoot through his chest. He fell. The war raged around him, but the sounds began to grow distant, as if he was sinking into darkness. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Then, he felt it. Yelena's locket was still there, pressed against her skin. He closed his eyes, and for an instant, there was no war. There was only her. The pain was unbearable. Constantine tried to breathe, but each sigh came like a blade piercing his chest. Blood slowly dripped down his uniform, mixing with the cold earth. His heavy eyes could barely focus on the stars twinkling above him. The sound of battle still roared around him, gunshots and explosions echoing in the distance, but he no longer cared. He knew that. This was his end. He tried to move his hand and felt something under his fingers. It was the letter. The last letter he had written to Yelena. His heart sped up. He couldn't let those words get lost. With an almost impossible effort, he tore open the pocket of his uniform and slid the letter inside, protecting it against his chest, where the gold medallion was inside. Yelena also rested. She needs to know. The biting wind whispered around him, as if the world itself was mourning his departure. His eyes burned, but not from the cold. "I promised I'd come back." But the promises, he realized, they were not always strong enough to win the war. His mind began to wander, bringing back images of a time that seemed to belong to another life. Yelena running through the flower fields, her laughter dancing in the wind. The letters they exchanged, their secrets written in words only they understood. The soft song she hummed by the river, without knowing he was watching her. The last promise they made at the train station. He tried to hold on to these memories, but they seemed to slip through his fingers like sand in the wind. "I don't want to forget." But darkness was coming. And then, a final thought flashed through his mind like a bolt of lightning. If I could just see her one last time. A tear slipped from her eyes, and then, everything went silent. The soldiers advanced through the destroyed village. Bodies lay on the ground, the smell of gunpowder still permeating the air. Among them, one of them noticed something. A man lying in the mud, holding a medallion and a piece of paper stained with blood. The soldier knelt down and carefully picked up the letter, feeling the gravity of what he had in his hands. He looked at the name on the envelope, written in shaky letters, Yelena. For a moment, he stood still, holding that piece of paper that carried a man's last breath. So, he put the letter in his pocket. Someone needed to deliver it. The morning was calm, as if the world ignored the war that still raged in distant lands. The sun cast a soft light on the small village where Yelena had lived, but nothing seemed to warm his heart that morning. The days had dragged on since Konstantin had left. Every dawn, she ran to the mailbox, waiting for a new letter, a new sign of life. The simple act of holding those words written by him was enough to make her feel that, somehow, he was still close. But that day, there were no letters, just a telegram. Yelena saw the postman walking slowly to her door. His gaze lowered, his steps hesitant. His heart tightened in his chest. Before he even said anything, before he even held out the little beige envelope, she knew. The postman didn't say a word. He just handed over the paper and bowed his head slightly, as if in a silent gesture of regret. Her trembling fingers opened the envelope, and her eyes fell on the words I never wanted to read. "We regret to inform you that Private Konstantin Ivanov has fallen in action. Our condolences." The world fell apart. Yelena didn't scream. He didn't cry right away. The paper fell from his hands. His body felt frozen, unable to react. The pain came slowly, like a cruel wave rising and suffocating. She fell to her knees on the wooden floor of the small house, her eyes staring blankly at the wall. The next few days were a blur. She didn't speak. She didn't eat. She sat by the window, holding Konstantin's last letters, as if his presence was still there, somehow. At night, she lay in bed and closed her eyes, waiting to hear him call her name. But there was only silence. Time has lost its meaning. Spring passed, and winter arrived again, covering the village in white, like the night they said goodbye. But he never came back. Then, one cold afternoon, a soldier appeared at the door of his house. He was holding an envelope, but this was not a telegram. "Are you Yelena?" She nodded, unable to speak. The man handed him the letter carefully. It was found with him. Before. He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. She took the envelope with shaking hands and closed the door slowly. For a moment, couldn't open it. The fear was paralyzing. It was the last thing Konstantin had left for her, and when he finished reading it, he would really be gone. But then, with a deep sigh, she slid her fingers across the seal and opened the folded paper. The letters were shaky, as if he had struggled to write them. "My beloved Yelena, if this is my last letter, I want you to know that every beat of my heart belonged to you. I fought to come back. I fought for us. But if fate is cruel to me, I want you to keep living. I want you to dream, to love, to sing as you always sang by the river. If you ever miss me, look at the sky, I'll be there. In every star, in every breeze, in every note of your voice. Forgive me for not keeping my promise, but my love for you will never die. Goodbye, my star." Yelena felt the tears flow before she even realized she was crying. She clutched the letter to her chest and sobbed like never before. There was nothing more to do. The war had taken Konstantin, but I couldn't take their love. The snow fell slowly, covering the world in a silent blanket of white. Yelena walked slowly through the village's small cemetery, holding an envelope and a single red rose. Her steps were light, almost hesitant, as if each step brought her closer to a moment she wasn't yet ready to face. But I needed it. That morning, after months of mourning, she made a decision. I couldn't live stuck in the past, waiting for someone who would never come back, but I couldn't forget either. And that's why he was there, to say his last goodbye. The wind blew softly as she arrived before the tombstone marked with her name, Konstantin Ivanov. She took a deep breath, feeling a wave of pain crush her chest. But this time, there was something more. There, something stronger than pain. There was love. Slowly, she knelt in the cold snow and ran her fingers over the name etched into the stone. "Hey, my love." His voice came out in a whisper. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over her. The flowery field where they ran together. The letters he wrote, full of promises and dreams. The last night under the stars, when he promised he would always come back. Sheathid closed his eyes to contain the tears, but one of them escaped and fell silently onto the cold marble. "I read your letter, all the words." Her fingers trembled as she picked up the envelope she had brought with her. "But now, I need to write to you one last time." With a pencil and a piece of paper, she wrote, "My dear Konstantin, since the day you left, my heart has been trapped between the past and the present. I tried to find you in the shadows of my house, in the night wind, in the stars that twinkle above me, but you weren't there. Today I realize that you never left. You are here. It's in the love you left behind, in the words you wrote to me, in the dreams we built together. I promise I will live, not for me, but for both of us. And every time the wind touches my face, I will close my eyes and listen to your voice, because love never dies. Goodbye, my love." She folded the paper carefully and placed it at the base of the tombstone, along with the red rose. The wind blew, making the snow dance around him. For a moment, she felt something, a gentle touch on your face, as if an invisible hand was caressing your skin. A whisper in the wind, a distant echo of a promise never broken. I always come back to you." His lips curved into a sad smile. So without looking back, Yelena got up and walked back home. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that Konstantin never really left, because some loves never die. The snow had stopped. The wind blew gently over the fields, covered in white, as if the earth itself was silent, respecting the pain that Yelena carried in her chest. Every step she took away from the cemetery was heavy, as if she was leaving a piece of herself behind. But at the same time, there was something different inside her, something that, for months, she hadn't felt. Konstantin's absence would always be there, like a silent shadow. He wouldn't come back. He would no longer walk through that door with a tired smile, holding a letter for her. He would not hold her on a cold night, nor dance with her under the starry sky. This was the cruel truth of war. She didn't just lead lives, she led futures. But as she walked, Yelena noticed something. Not in a physical way, not in the way she so desired, but in every memory, in every laugh saved in the past, in every letter that she reread every night. It was in the locket she held between her fingers, the same one she had given him before leaving. It was in the gentle breeze that touched your face, in the way the leaves on the trees swayed in the wind. And then, for the first time since receiving the news of his death, she smiled. It wasn't a smile of happiness, nor of relief. It was a smile of acceptance. Their love was not defeated by war. Their love was not destroyed by death. He was alive because she was alive. Yelena stopped for a moment and looked up at the sky. The heavy winter clouds were beginning to part, revealing small slits of golden light. She remembered the words from Konstantin's last letter. "If you ever miss me, look at the sky. I will be there, in every star, in every breeze, in every note of your voice." Tears streamed down her face, but this time, they were not out of despair. They were of love. She realized she had a choice. You could spend the rest of your life mourning what you lost, or you could honor what they lived together. And Konstantin would not have wanted to see her suffer. He wanted her viva. He wanted her happy. She took a deep breath and squeezed the locket one last time, before tucking it inside her blouse. Then he turned and started walking home. This time, his steps were firmer. The pain was still there, and probably always would be, but love would be too. Why some loves never die, and theirs would live forever. If this story touched your heart, know that true love never fades. It resists time, distance, and even war. Konstantin and Yelena showed us that some promises cannot be broken because they live inside us forever. Now tell me, do you believe that love can transcend death? Comment "Love Never Dies" and share this story with someone special. Leave a like if this story moved you, and subscribe for more stories that speak to the soul. Time can take people, but it will never erase true feelings. If you have ever experienced an unforgettable love, this story is for you. Turn on notifications and continue this journey with me, because some stories need to be told, and some loves remembered.